All right. Hello, everybody. Ed Dodge here with lostgoddess.io. And we're going to be expanding what we're doing on Goddess Bible Study by starting to talk to some more other folks and expanding the conversation we're having. So we got happy to introduce Bernie Taylor to you. Just recently meeting Bernie for the first time. So we're just going to be having a little get to know each other conversation, but he's been working on some very parallel scholarship to mine. Uh, he's got his own website, beforeorion.com. I'll link to it in the show notes. But on his little bio there says Bernie Taylor is a naturalist, author, and cultural astronomer whose research explores the origins of mankind's creativity and awareness of the natural world. His works in these areas include Biological Time, 2004, and Before Orion, Finding the Face of the Hero, 2017, which explore a deep root to mankind's creative capacity by looking at how hunter gatherers viewed themselves through Paleolithic cave art to 40,000 years ago. Bernie proposes that select cave paintings are fundamental pieces in the human journey to self realization, the foundation of astronomy, and a record of biological knowledge that irrevocably impacted some of the artistic styles, religious practices, and stories that are still with us. Bernie is widely interviewed on podcasts, presents highly interactive programs at high school through graduate level classes, and gives engaging talks at popular conferences and academic symposiums across social and physical science disciplines. Well, that's great. Yeah, so Bernie, I mean, I was going through your website and the work there, and clearly there's a lot of parallels with what I was writing about in History of the Goddess. You know a lot more than I do, so I'm eager to learn from you because I started History of the Goddess. The timeline narrative that I go through in the book is, from the Paleolithic, from the cave art and the goddess figurines, and then I bring this linear history thread of history into the Bible and into modern times. And your work is much deeper on that deeper part than mine. So anyway, I want to say hi to Bernie, let you introduce yourself here, and thanks for being on.
Oh, Ed, thank you for having me on the program. I've done probably 200 podcast episodes across different channels. This is the first, and I usually come on as the expert on the subject matter. I'm the guest expert because nobody else knows anything about it. But in this case, you're the expert host. So this is kind of a switcheroo for me. I have to get used to it. That my ego has to come down. I've got to, acknowledge that I'm not. This is not. I'm not
Well, I
the
think we know different
supreme.
stuff, so I'm eager to learn from you.
So I'm humble in this session. So beware, and challenge me questions, ask me questions, because this is about learning, sharing, and so forth. This is not my area of expertise. I'm going to tell you right now, the goddesses. Um, I stumbled upon this. I've been working on Upper Paleolithic cave art since 2004. So we're going back 3 decades, right? 3 decades. I'm sorry, 2 decades. Long period of time. And I was interested in the psychology, the astronomy, the imagery as it relates to the human imagination. That was my story. I was asked to give a presentation on Ephesus to a private audience. And I said, well, my response was, well, how about Göbekli Tepe? Because I knew something about Göbekli Tepe and I knew a little bit about Çatalhöyük. And they said, well, we really want you to talk about Ephesus. And so my response back was the origins of Ephesus, starting to pre-pottery Neolithic and pre-agriculture. Because, of course, Ephesus is the inheritance of those. What I didn't realize at the time was there was a whole narrative from Çatalhöyük down through Ephesus, and that's what you do. I had no idea about that. I was totally clueless. In fact, I didn't know that much about Ephesus itself, other than St. Paul gets kicked out, which everybody knows that story. Um, and then so I still was determined to start it with Göbekli Tepe. And what I realized is I looked back at the evidence of Göbekli Tepe, the artifacts, and they are in fact synchronous with those at Çatalhöyük. And Çatalhöyük was already, through your work and others, passed down through the ancient world and across the Mediterranean, which again is your work. So I stumbled onto something, or a path that other people were at a different point in. So, and then what I said was, I also reviewed some of the artifacts from Ephesian artifacts, and I had some slightly different interpretations based on the baggage that I bring to the table. We all bring baggage, and that's what I want to talk about. What I came on to talk about today is the synchronicity between what you do and what I do, and how we can form a common knowledge base for the audience. So, Ed,
Yeah,
is
no,
that
that's great.
fully acceptable from your side as the expert?
Yeah. I think Ephesus is such a great like hinge point for this conversation and for like a collaboration because Ephesus is something I learned about too. Like, I didn't know anything about Ephesus before beginning my research on history of the goddess, which was only a couple of years ago. I was mainly doing this work in 2018, in 2019, and Ephesus plays this really profound role all the way through because the Virgin Mary traditions in Christianity come out of there. So it continues to be relevant. And Ephesus had the one of the greatest temples ever built in the ancient world, and then the Christians burn it down, the temple to Artemis. So let's. I'm gonna let you talk for.
So I'm going to share.
All right.
But we're all about sharing here, aren't we?
Yeah, Ephesus is a great spot to. And yeah, I was just following threads that I'm picking up from other folks. I didn't. Merlin Stones, When God Was a Woman, she did this research back in the 70s that really lays out the whole thread. That's an amazing book considering the era in which she did the research, totally analog, no internet, no computers, like going museum to museum, library to library, and doing that work independently. She wasn't an academic. I think it's the only book she ever wrote even. Um, and that book lays out the whole thread that I basically followed from her in a lot of ways.
Someday, if you do go to Ephesus, a really cool place, there is the Ephesus Museum of Ephesus, and in that museum there is this sort of like the final part of it. In a room, there's a exhibit showing these 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 Artemis Ephesian history going back to Çatalhöyük. Okay, so they're acknowledging in the region that that is part of the story, and you could follow all the artifacts that you can see the Ephesian, you can see the Roman, you can see the Hittite, and all the way going back to Çatalhöyük. It is the narrative today. I don't know how far it goes back in time, but it's not a. This is not a fringe idea in that part
No.
of the world. But cool. So I'm going to break this program into 3 sections. One is Anatolian prehistory, of course, where we start, Greco-Roman, Ephesus, and then shaping a new reality. And when people, where is Ephesus? Well, Ephesus is really part of Anatolia, which is also known as Asia Minor. And it is on the Aegean Sea. No big surprises
And were
there.
you just
And
there?
right,
Were you just recently traveling there in Turkey?
yeah, yeah.
And how was the travel out there? And how was it?
Oh, I'm going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you that. That's a little further because I had a guide. Okay, he's Pritchard, so we're going to get there. But it was, it was quite the journey. But I was actually on a cruise for most of it, and then we stopped in Istanbul, and then we flew into Göbekli Tepe, which I'll tell you about. But Ephesus is right across from Athens, and I took a cruise from Athens to Istanbul, and it stopped at multiple places in Ephesus, or the port for Ephesus was one of them, and it was a great experience. But I'm going to start this at interior at Göbekli Tepe, which is far to the east of Ephesus, which is where my host said it's too far to talk about for Ephesus, but I came up with a story. And Göbek Tepe means hill among the Turks, and Göbekli Tepe means pot-bellied hill. Göbek means navel or center. Göbekli means belly, neither male nor female designation, but it does mean a belly, and so that ties into the narrative of the whole concept. Among the Kurdish people, it's Gurir Mirzan. Gurir means hill, and Mirzan means wish, and people do go to wish on the hill. But kind of, where do we put Göbekli Tepe into the big picture perspective? Well, it's a long time after Paleolithic cave art, so it's not something that's new per se, but from my perspective, it was something along the way. But relative to the other standing stones, outside of caves. It is in the region of the first ones that we now know about. There's a whole bunch of tepes around Göbekli Tepe, and then we have Gigantea on Malta's Gozo Island, Great Pyramid, Sarsen stones. So we have a pretty good gap between Göbekli Tepe and the other tepes in the area before we pick up Gigantea on Gozo Island. And this gives a kind of a time frame of all this sort of stuff. When Göbekli Tepe was first unearthed, because people had known about it for a long period of time, but they knew that the tops of the T-pillars, they stepped on them, all that sort of stuff. But when it was first unearthed, 15 or so years ago, it was by Klaus Schmidt, German archaeologist, who's a central character in the story. And he said it's the world's oldest temple. The tourism people ran with it, and it is now a point of national pride that Göbekli Tepe is the world's oldest temple. The French say that their Lascaux cave at 17,000 years ago is a Sistine Chapel of the Paleolithic. So these are really more about nationality and identity than they are about archaeology.
Yeah. And I'd like to add one point from my frame of reference here for the audience is that this is coming up right at the end of the Ice Age, as at the very beginning of the Neolithic and at the end of the Ice Age, what I think is a mass extinction event. I'm pretty persuaded there was a mass extinction event at the end of the Ice Age in the Younger Dryas. And now the people are reemerging, and we get the very beginnings of the rebirth of culture and everything. And it's on this fringe of the Ice Age.
Exactly. And Ice Age art in Europe, cave art, ends 12,000 years ago. A few hundred years later, Göbekli Tepe surfaces,
right.
And the other Tepe sites. So these are linked. These are linked, definitely through the iconography. And you asked me how I got to Göbekli Tepe. Well, actually, first you asked me how I got to Turkey. I took a cruise, and then we from Istanbul, Taha, our Göbekli Tepe guide, arranged everything, all the flights, the hotel, shuttle, getting around here and there, and we had a really great time. Taha is the man. If you type in Göbekli Tepe, Taha, he's very easy to find. Everybody who goes to Göbekli Tepe goes with Taha. Okay, that's how it is.
It's doing a good business.
And Göbekli Tepe is most known for this so-called vulture stone, Pillar 43, enclosure D. And we can look at this as enclosure D, looking down from the walkway, because this is it's still an excavation in process, but it has a dome over it, and there's lots of tourists. Most of them come from the greater Turkey area, and they come from Germany. Not so many Americans. But we can some of these pillars are 6 or 7 meters tall. It's a really cool site. And my perspective that they were probably domed in the past. Nobody can actually prove that or does prove it one or the other. But my bet is that they were domed.
Covered with what, do you think? Like fabric?
They could have been covered with
or wood.
Wood. There was wood at that time. There was a lot of wood in the area.
Sure.
It was somewhat. It wasn't a marsh per se, but it wasn't.
Yeah, no, it'd
be similar to Northern California.
I'm sure they
Northern
did.
California.
Native Americans built plenty of stuff out of wood that doesn't survive in archaeology.
Yeah,
so.
Wood or mats from the reeds, from the rivers, things like that. So on Göbekli Tepe, in the so-called vulture stone, there's not a vulture, because we can look at a vulture and we can eagle, and they just don't match. But what it does look like is that, like, a human has put on the dress of a vulture, has put on the wings, has put on the head, the beak, and so forth. And so my read on this, it's actually an avianoid. You can call it an angel, you can call it a birdman, whatever. Then we find this iconography around the world where the people have put on the full dress, or they've just put a feather in their hair. And around the world, indigenous people, seeing it as a meeting, the bird takes them to the great beyond. And eagles tend to be very high-flying birds. And there's people in the greater Asia that put the deceased out for the vulture to take them to such a place.
In Peru, they have the condor, takes your soul.
Exactly. It's a worldwide concept of the high-flying birds taking one to the great beyond. And so I say that's an avianoid or birdman, angel, if you will. And below him is or her, it's hard to say, is a man who has a male organ, is missing his head. And we'll get back to that later. We'll get back to that one later. Now, I believe that the most significant place in that whole Göbekli Tepe is not the enclosure with the vulture and the avianoid birdman. Um, I believe that is the leopard pillar room, which is just above where above the hooded enclosure that you cannot go to see. And nobody's hiding it, but it just was never prepared so people could see it. And there's two pillars, left and right, and between the two pillars is this woman. And she's engraved on a slab. You can see this woman with this engraving in the Çatalhöyük Museum nearby to Göbekli Tepe today. But there's two pillars. There's two pillars. Now, the distinguished archaeologists, and by the way, I'm not anti-archaeology, but I think this one is totally bullshit, say that she's being penetrated by a penis with the lines
Yeah, I know.
possibly.
Like, it's crazy. She's obviously giving birth. Like,
She's obviously given birth, and you could say, that she's doing a breech birth, whether the leg is coming out first or it's placenta in the tissue. Either one, I'm okay with. And I'm looking. I took a good look at the Çatalhöyük Museum. You can see the scale relative to my body. So she's obviously giving birth. She's giving a squat birth, as I say. It's either a breech birth where the feet are coming out first, or it is the tissue and placenta, but she's giving birth. When Klaus Schmidt, the German archaeologist, brought this slab forward, he said it was graffiti, such that there's no other women on the site. Therefore, depictions of women at the site. Therefore, it was not integral to Göbekli Tepe. Now, there is another female character, which we'll get to shortly, but there are female characters among the animals at Göbekli Tepe. They're not all male. There's definitively males. There's definitively female characters because they're pregnant, and there are characters it's hard to tell one way or the other. They need more study. So Klaus Schmidt was wrong, and he came with a psyche that in the distant past, men were bigger, stronger, faster, and apparently more wiser, and therefore society needed to be ruled by men.
right.
And there's still people at that psyche today. And
Yeah,
that was
patriarchy
certainly Klaus
forever.
Schmidt.
That's what we were taught. I mean, that's what the
Yeah,
culture totally teaches. Is it's been patriarchy forever. It's just the way it is, and anything else is like inconceivable. And even though
exactly.
matriarchies are all over the place.
Exactly. And so at the top of the hill, which is the engraved slab of this birthing woman is just under the hood, that the invisible point, and to the right of it is a tree, and it is a fertility tree where Turks, Arabs, and Kurds, they wish for safe birth, for happy children, all that sort of stuff. It is part of the culture, but it's interesting that they have that at the top of the Göbekli Tepe hill, right next to this birthing woman. And so they could not have known about the birthing woman. Therefore, because it was unexcavated. Therefore, the top of the hill, of these tall hills, and this is Göbekli Tepe is the tallest hill in the area, itself became the point of wishing.
Which is
And
exactly how they describe it in the Bible, going up on the hilltops to do their pagan goddess stuff and fertility stuff. Exactly what they're condemning in the Bible.
exactly. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Now, there's another object that was found by Klaus Schmidt's team, and he said that this character is the prominent erect phallus. And it is because Göbekli Tepe's iconography is generally exclusively male. But he's already discounted the other one as being graffiti and not part of
Yeah,
the Göbekli system.
I was looking. You had sent me this slide deck before, and I was looking at this, and I did not realize that they thought that this was not a. I thought everybody understood these to be, because I'm familiar with these objects, and I've always understood them to be birthing. I was surprised that they were saying anything otherwise.
Yes, and I have archaeology friends, and they said to me they had no idea that there were female characters at Göbekli Tepe, and they said honestly, we had no idea. And what Klaus Schmidt and friends were saying was that all these iphthalats, all these men with penises, therefore that must be a penis as well. And I say bunk. I call it bunk, and I say that both of these characters are birthing females.
Yeah, I
They
definitely
both
agree.
one is sitting, one is squatting, and that the woman that to the viewer's left, which is a small stone statuette about the size of your thumb, at least my thumb. I don't know how big your thumb is, but about the size of my thumb. So that she's doing an end call birth, meaning that the amniotic sac with the child within it has come out of her. And end call births are very rare today. I'm sure they're rare then. They're typically preterm deliveries. People call births are more common, whereas the amniotic sac might be on the top of someone's head or the baby's head. Some famous characters, such as Sigmund Freud, was a call birth. And it was believed in the past that if you were a call birth, you had some great spiritual destiny in your path. And one could consider that for Sigmund Freud, of course, right? Um,
Sure.
absolutely. So in this Chandelier Museum, one could see that one side of this character of this birthing woman is sintered off, so it was on top of some sort of heated surface, and it burns it down. And we can see a feline on one side of her. We can't see on the other side, but we really can't see the other side of her anyway. So I'm going to call it that they're felines on both sides, which ties us back to the lion pillars with the birthing woman between them. Now, Göbekli Tepe is pre-pottery Neolithic. This particular stone at the Chandelier Museum has at least 2 pregnant women, and is the third one in the middle, and the one in the middle pregnant as well. Yeah, I'd go with it. But this is pre-pottery Neolithic, so they knew what pregnancy was, obviously, and they celebrated pregnancy. And again, why didn't Klaus Schmidt say, we've got pregnant women in other images? Why can this only be male centered? And the fact of the matter is, it's not. There's other sites in the general area. This one is a mound, pre-Paleolithic as well, in the realm of Göbekli Tepe time period. And we see, hey, I'd call them, they're female for sure, and I would have no issue saying that they're pregnant, but they're certainly female. And they would fit into the side of one's pocket today, but maybe they had some other way of carrying them in the past. At Göbekli Tepe, this one is probably about the size, maybe my foot, just below my calf. Is it the same as these previous ones? I don't know, but we're seeing a. I don't see a huge penis on this one. Okay, that's my position. But I don't see breasts either. So are they the same? Are they in the same family? It's unsure. So this is kind of where you pick up in Çatalhöyük. Çatalhöyük is west of Göbekli Tepe on our path to Ephesus, where we're going to get to. We're going to get there. Höyük means mound. Çatalhöyük means fork mound. And when you have that swiggle thing under the C or under the S, it becomes like a ch. You add like an H to it. That's, now you got some Turkish. And Çatalhöyük was we call a small town today, but in fact, it was a metropolis of its time. And one of the things about it was you would recognize these as kind of a town in the old Middle East today. And within Çatalhöyük, they buried the dead under the homes. And there was also imagery of vultures, the Cleary vultures. This is a kind of reenactment of sort of vultures with headless people. And this is a reproduction based on the original archaeological evidence that one could see. It's not as clear, but it's the same narrative. Okay. And we saw the same iconography at Göbekli Tepe with the so-called vulture person, the avianoid, and the headless man below. Okay. So these are traditions that they're not that far distant in time as I see things, because I'm thinking tens of thousands of years ago. But clearly, these people carried on the same traditions. Now, this is obviously a figure that you've seen. I mean, you worked on it, you talked about it in your book. And I would say that she's then called birth in the same way as the Göbekli Tepe woman, meaning that the amniotic sac came out. The baby came out in the amniotic sac. And again, we have lions on both sides of her, just as I would say with the statuette the size of my thumb, with one side centered off. She had cats on both sides of her. And we find for the leopard pillar room at Göbekli Tepe, we have the 2 lion pillars on opposite sides of the birthing woman in the slab. These are the same. You have what I'm calling the ankle birth down between her calves, and shame on Klaus Schmidt for not connecting these two.
Right.
Completely shame on Klaus Schmidt and
Yeah,
his
I'm
team.
surprised.
They should have called this one out. So this became more significant in January of this year when a paper came out with Science that looked at the grave goods and the DNA of these people that were buried under the homes in Çatalhöyük. And they found that the genetic line in the homes based on the DNA was from mother to daughter to daughter to daughter. Um, and if that final daughter, great granddaughter, did make it, a new maternal genetic line would come about.
How
They
many
also found that
how many bodies were they finding in each home?
well, they based the study on 395 ancient individuals.
Hmm.
Okay, there's a lot of them. I mean, there's a lot of them. It was a thing, uh,
I wonder if they
and
buried everybody under the house or only certain people.
they couldn't have buried everybody because there's a population of
Well,
eight thousand
that's
people.
what I was
Yeah,
wondering.
so there was definitely certain people, and of course, the women in the line, and the women in those
So maybe it's like
matriarchal
the
lines,
matriarchs are getting buried.
perhaps the matriarchs. One could say yes, the matriarchs are obviously getting buried, yeah, and they receive more grave goods um, of the female subadults. And if the female line got broken, the new line
Hmm.
would continue on, and so
And
um,
this is new research, huh?
it was new research in January this year, which
Oh, wow.
actually made the connection between this what I'm calling the end call birthing woman at Göbekli Tepe with the seated woman with the lions at Çatalhöyük more significant. Okay.
Right.
Because the story has since been rewritten, whereas in the past people would say, well, she's just a seated woman with lions at Çatalhöyük, but now she exemplifies a matriarchy society. Okay. It's the story has completely been changed. And it's based on the DNA, not on someone's opinion or whether there's a penis in there or not, or wrongful opinion in this case. So one of the things important about Çatalhöyük is the beginning of agriculture. And so Çatalhöyük, I believe, was first excavated in 1950s, 1960s or so. So this is not, it's been around for a long period of time. These artifacts have been known, um, but it's a cool site. And the spread of agriculture came out of that region of so near Çatalhöyük, and it went across the Mediterranean westward and into Spain, the UK, and so forth. So when people talk about the birthplace of civilization, they say Anatolia, Asia Minor. Um, and if someone's perspective is that agriculture defines civilization, then in fact they would be correct. I don't see the world that way, but that is typically how people do it. And then these mounds continue on. At least what was below the mounds. We have Çukurçatalhöyük, which is very close. You could walk to it from ancient Ephesus. People hunter gatherers. They kept pigs, goats, domesticated animals, and they hunted. It was ultimately abandoned, the site. So these things were spread across Anatolia, aka Asia Minor. Now we're coming really into your realm. Is we have these keyblades. Some people say Sibyls. What word do you use? Because we're gonna go whatever
I
you
usually
use.
it's Sibylle, but I don't
Okay,
know.
you said so. Today it's Sibyl. It's Sibyl. Okay, it's Sibyl.
Why, what do you say? Do you say Kaibel? Or what do they
um,
say in Turkey? What are they saying out there now?
well, it depends where in Turkey you are.
Okay.
Um, so there's regional dialects. So you said Cybele. We're gonna go with Cybele today in honor of your work. But people argue about this thing. It's nuts. What most important about this one, the Cybele, this one is just north of Ephesus. So we're talking a day's work or so. Um, and with this one is in the mountain, we can see it relative to a human, and people are
Uh,
saying this is another a Cybele. Okay, and it comes from the time of the Hittites. Hittites were patriarchal, but there were matriarchal societies during that time period. The Hittites ended at the same time of the presumed Trojan War. Awesome movie, by the way. It doesn't follow the book. Okay. Now, if you go someday when you do go to Ephesus, will go to the Ephesus Archaeological Museum, and you will see this collection of all these Cybeles. I mean, there's got to be about 20 of them, and you have the woman with flanked by the lions.
Right.
So we have the same theme going back to Çatalhöyük. We have the same thing going back to Göbekli Tepe. This was a thing, and this is 4th century BCE, Hellenistic. So now we're going to go to Greco-Roman Ephesus, and this is the Greco-Roman version of things, because what we have just done was the Neolithic indigenous peoples of the region, completely different narratives. And when you go to Ephesus, you're going to hear that story of Andronicus, Prince of Athens, left his country to found Ephesus. Of course, there were people living there already, indigenous peoples. And Athens isn't so far from Ephesus, not a big stretch. He sailed across the Aegean Sea. And the location is where the priestess of Delphi prophesies a fish and a boar will show you the way. And this is the Greco-Roman version. And if you go to Ephesus, you will see the Temple of Hadrian, which has replicas of this slab that is in the Ephesus Archaeological Museum. And we see Andronicus on the horse, and he is chasing down a wild boar. And the replicas are at the Temple of Hadrian outside today. And we see Andronicus chasing a boar and some other characters. Okay. We see Andronicus with his dog. There's lots of images of him with his dog. It was a thing. I'm a dog person. I'm all on board. Next to Andronicus on that slab is Artemis and Apollo. And you can see faintly Artemis in the Temple of Artemis on this coin. And you can see roughly her head and her body. And Artemis and Apollo were twins.
Right.
So what does Apollo have to do with any of this in this so-called matriarchal society? Because the Greeks had shifted it from matriarchy to patriarchy.
Right.
Well, Apollo, a temple of Apollo, Andronicus was given the prophecy by the priestess about the fish and the boar will show you the way. Okay. Now the Ephesians had their own temple of Apollo that was much larger. In fact, it was the second or third largest temple in the ancient world. And so it was at Didyma, which is to the south of Ephesus. So they were competing narratives on where these temples were. Now, in the Greco story is that Dionysius comes from India, and he's got his companion, the satyr, Pan holding the Theris, and from India is the elephant depicted. And one can see what a satyr looks like. And just about every archaeological museum in that part of the world, you will see a satyr. So shaping a new reality. What do the Greco-Romans bring on their journey? Okay. Because they bring change, major change to the region through their mythology. And well, Dionysius, he drove the Amazons from Ephesus, the so-called Temple of Artemis. Okay. He drove them away. He was the hero of the Greeks. And we can see him on that free slab, holding the satyr, that he's chasing out the fleeing Amazons, the matriarchal peoples. And of course, he is the hero in Greek psyche, and the Amazonians are the presumed villainesses. They're telling the story, they're reinforcing it through their art. And so we entered Dionysius into the mythology, into the unconscious of peoples, travels through the arts and literature, family traditions, education, and becomes codified law in the conscious mind. So the Greeks have reshaped the reality of that region. They've created an entirely new reality through the Dionysius, which they portray at the Temple of Hadrian. Okay. The archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, pointing the finger directly at him, at Göbekli Tepe, did the exact same thing. Men were always the dominant people in the world. They're bigger, stronger, faster, apparently more wiser. Therefore, everything's got to have a phallus, and there are no female characters deep into the Neolithic. And if anything that looked like a female character, well, it's graffiti. It's not integral to the site. Okay. It's the same concept. And so modern day archaeology has been carrying on the same narrative. Now, the pushback on that is coming from so-called feminists. And are the feminists projecting their own psyche, or are they following the archaeological evidence? That's a point of contention. But You and I coming this not as feminists. We're coming as equal peoples, male and females. So you and I are not carrying that baggage. And so we're coming at looking at the archaeology. We're in some ways neutral on this subject. Okay. So again, we have Hercules on another slab and his cohorts, and he's chasing out the fleeing Amazons. So the Greeks were pushing out matriarchy among the Amazons, and the Greeks are the heroes, and the Amazonians are the presumed villainesses because
Right. And the historical Amazons being the Scythians, who were the nomadic horse riding people from the Asian steppe.
yes,
And they have a very matriarchal society, and the women are trained to ride and fight alongside the men. And so they
yeah,
do have these women warriors who, with a bow and arrow on horseback, are every bit as dangerous as a man. And they, by their tradition was that they founded Ephesus. That's like the Amazonian Scythian
exactly.
tradition.
Yeah, and they're terrible. Those Amazons, they're just terrible because they are females. But we
Right.
looked at this today. Is that the Greeks are invading foreign beliefs, colonizers, and the Amazonians are indigenous traditions. That's how we look at it today. At least that's how we look at it in the U.S. Relative to Native Americans, and I see that as a healthy perspective. And among the Greeks and their mythology, ninth labor of Hercules, he steals the golden girdle of Queen Hippo. She offers it to him. He takes it. He slays her and her consorts because that's what needed to be done. Okay, because in Greek psyche, um, that the Amazons were people ruled by women, but Amazon was really code for matriarchy. It wasn't really
Right.
any specific person in any area, but um, because they were always eager for war. Because they were always eager for war, therefore the Greeks needed to eradicate them and all their traditions, and of course that carries through. And in the Amazon in the Greek tradition, labors of Hercules, the Amazonian queen, Hippo founds the city of Ephesus. Okay. This is part of the literature, and Hippo, um, she sets up a wooden image beneath an oak trunk, so she's tied to trees. Okay. And then we come to Ephesus itself. Ephesus proper. And this was the Lady of Ephesus, aka beautiful Artemis, was dug up from the Temple of Artemis, 2nd century CE. But these things are found all over the Mediterranean in the ancient world.
And you mentioned Paul from the book of Acts in the Bible. When he goes to the Temple of Artemis in Ephesus and starts a riot, and they're talking about the tinsmiths who are making statues, these are the
Yeah.
statues that they're making, and that
These
they're
are absolutely the statues. And in
and
our
they
yeah,
and pilgrims would take these home as like they're to have as memorabilia or whatever as idols in the house. Um,
exactly. And because he said that you're idolatrous, therefore you are going to hell. And that's the narrative. But what are these artifacts? Because I've looked fairly deeply into them, and so there's many of them, slightly different forms. We have the Great Artemis there. Well, on the head, above the head, you have this architectural structure. Can't tell you exactly what it is, but on her breast, neck to breast, we see lions, nuts, and fruit. We'll get deeper into that. Then we see mythical characters, honeybees, and goats. Okay. Now, these on her chest, they have been traditionally or historically described as multiple breasts. You can see it on Wikipedia. I think that is a completely nonsensical interpretation. You will also hear balls. Okay. I'm not going to go there. Um, lately, you'll hear bee combs. Well, honeybees make hexagonal cones. I can tell you that because we're beekeepers in our home.
right.
We're beekeepers. We have 2 hives, 50,000 bees flying around our backyard. Some of our neighbors appreciate it. Some of them are all panicked about it. Whenever they see a wasp in their backyard, they come knocking on the door. Your bee is in our backyard. Okay. It's
My friend's
absolutely
got millions of bees on his on his farm, like doing some commercial bee honey making, I guess.
yeah. We're hobby bees. It's about more about the flowers, and we do harvest the bees. And in some neighborhoods, they honor the bees and they bring them food,
Right.
as opposed to our neighborhoods was crazy about a wasp in our backyard. And I believe that our bees would like chocolate chip cookies, I believe that they would prefer the whole house type and freshly baked. But I'm going to tell you, they're not honeybees for sure. That is a honeybee on the Artemis characters, but the top one is a honeybee. But that so-called, it's not a beehive on her chest. It totally isn't. And there's a insect below that I'm not sure what it is, working on it. Okay, so they're not beecombs, but I truly respect the people that believe it. They're not doing it out of, you know, some whatever crazy they they just don't know about bees. It's pretty simple. Well, on her chest we see acorns. Is it of the Kermes oak? What's certainly an acorn on her chest. We can see that. People aren't looking at all the characters. They're just looking and say, well, those are breasts, those are bull's balls, those are beehives, whatever the story is. And in the story, the the hymn to Artemis, the author talks about um, the oak trees. So it's mentioned. My perspective is that the big ones there are from fruit of the date palm tree, both in the cluster and the individual form. That's my perspective. You don't need honeybees do pollinate, or actually they do take pollen from the date palm. People would have noticed it, but you don't need honeybees to pollinate the date palm. They pollinate by themselves in the wind. And the bees are tied to on coinage with palm trees, and this we see the stag. Again, we have the same sort of iconography. So I truly respect the people that believe that those are bee combs, but it's not biologically based. They can find it in the literature. It's just not biologically based. Okay. And when I was there, I bought a little um, Artemisian statue, and she stands next to one of our beehives, and the
Nice.
bees are pretty happy with her. It's all working out. Nobody's complaining, and bees haven't flown away, and all that sort of stuff. So is she a symbolic tree of life? She kind of has that form. If we have the date palm and so forth, and so the body of the tree, but she doesn't really look like the Kermes oak, that's for sure. Um, but she does look a lot like a palm tree. If you go from the neck down, she looks like a palm tree. Is she a palm tree? I think so. I'm pretty, I put money on that one. At the base of her, one of them at the base doesn't have feet, the other one does. Does the base of her body sort of look like roots on the Lady of Ephesus? I would say so. Yeah. I looks pretty good to me. Now, going back to the Greeks and their hymn to Artemis, for you too, the Amazons who are always eager for war. I mean, does this woman built the form of a tree, mythical characters on her, bees and date palms, and does she say war to you?
No, she says nature.
Oh,
It's all about Mother Nature. Everything about it is nature based.
it's all nature based. Yeah, and the concept is absolutely beautiful. It's magnificent. It has nothing to do with being eager for war. Okay. And we can travel through, to the Roman era. We can continue to see these characters, and they have on top of her head. You see the structure. They either have one or two lines by the side, and in this particular one, this Sibylle, you can't see whether she's birthing or not. You can't tell.
Do you
But
think it matters if they're male or female lions?
So I can't. I've looked at them. I can't. Well, so these would all be male lions. Okay. Does it symbolically matter? It mattered to these people, but I can't tell you why they were or they weren't. But clearly, they kept choosing male lions. I mean,
Okay.
I keep saying, I'm not saying lionesses, I'm saying lions.
Okay.
And you can see on both sides of the Ephesian Artemises, when you don't have it on the side of the, walking, standing, you can see the lions on the shoulders. And next to this Lady of Artemis down by the bottom, those are not lions, they're hoofed animals. They could be deer. But yes, the lions continue on, whether they're by the sides, one or two, or they're on the shoulders. And on the shoulders goes back to the Göbekli Tepe, statuette that's about the size of my thumb. Um, so how did they dig up each other's statues? That's what I would say. I'm not convinced this is part of like some in the unconscious. Matriarchal statues, matriarchy can be in the unconscious, and the divine perspectives on fertility can be in the unconscious, but not the carrying on of the lions. Because you can go around the world where you see people where there are lions, and this is fairly unique in Anatolia, that you have the goddess character with the lions. This is
Right.
not a worldwide phenomenon. So I would say that these people kept digging up other people's artifacts, and maybe
Or it's just an unbroken tradition that just never
or
really.
it's an unbroken. Yeah, the actual it's so I would say that yes, it's an unbroken tradition through the finding of the artifacts, but the meanings probably changed over time. So
Sure.
the Romans had their own idea about the Sibylline's lions, and
Oh
they
yeah,
have
yeah, for
complete
sure.
different art. So the Romans didn't have the Göbekli Tepe narrative, but I'm pretty sure that the Göbekli Tepe narrative was the same as the Çatalhöyük because you have the end-call birth. Okay. I'm like,
Right, right.
I put money on that, and we can see these continuance of these lion characters with the end call births, the birthing woman between the two lion pillars at the top of the hill for at Göbekli Tepe and the Çatalhöyük.
Yeah,
And
this is one of the key narratives, like that I was learning when I wrote my book, and I was learning this stuff for the first time. This continuity right here is like this is one of the key pieces of evidence.
this is it. I mean, this is the big show, um, and that Klaus Schmidt called the woman on the slab as being graffiti, and the other woman as being having a penis between the legs, disenfranchises women in prehistory and prehistory.
Sure,
Um,
yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, it's just total crap. And he is deceased, but people in that world should really be saying, "Hey, let's not just rethink this. Let's talk about this and see what we've learned that this is psychological." And again, we have the mother goddess of peace with nature, which you have you determined as well, and she has no connection with the Diana of Versailles, the Roman or the Greek Artemis. These are they're not they're just not the same.
Well,
And if you
I
look at
mean, did the Greeks associated Artemis? I thought that was how it worked back then. I've always been curious about how the Greek Artemis and the Ephesian Artemis were married together, but my understanding is that in the ancient world they were married together.
so and that's a good point. So we're going to get there in one or two more slides. So yes, in the Greek world, they're married together because the Greeks were taking in aspects of the Ephesians, but carrying their own patriarchy into the
Absolutely.
conversation. As we can see in these Artemises just don't look the same. I mean, there's nothing. One looks subdued. One is all powerful among nature, and she's absolutely amazing. And the birthplace of the Greco-Roman Artemis was Delos. Um, Whereas the birthplace of the Ephesian Artemis was Ortygia. Okay.
And
They
this is
have
also
different.
represents one of the matriarchal patriarchal splits, is that the Greek
Yes.
Artemis is the daughter of Zeus. She's submissive to Zeus. That's her father. These
Mhm.
older matriarchal goddesses would not have been submissive to husband father types. And that's sort of the one of the key distinctions of what's coming later.
Artemis, exactly. The Ephesian Artemis always was,
Right.
whereas Greco-Roman Artemis came to be through Zeus.
Right.
That is probably the most important aspect of this whole thing. I'm glad that you brought it in. In fact, the Ephesians agree with you. They agree with you, and they brought it to the Roman Senate seeking to discredit the Delos Artemis
Okay. All right.
narrative. They said that you've got the story wrong, um, and just as you mentioned. Now, one
All
can
right. So
go
they
to
were
Artemis.
arguing about this. That's even better. They're actually arguing about it back
They were
then.
arguing about it. It's in the record. It's yeah.
And that's
Um,
after wait, what was the date on that when they were going? That's after Alexander the Great. This is in
um,
Roman era. Oh, this is in
so this
Roman.
time of the Romans, yes.
Yeah, okay.
This is a long time after Alexander
All
the
right,
Great.
yeah.
Yeah,
So in Roman era,
but
they're arguing about it for sure.
and the Romans are arguing about yeah, because it was about power. It
Sure.
was about power. And so there is the third temple. There are many temples of Artemises that were built and were burned and so forth. This is a model of the third temple of Artemis that's at a miniature park in Istanbul. It's not AI. It's reproduction of sorts. You can go to the temple of Artemis or what remains of it, and this is what you will see. Not a lot. Okay.
One forlorn post. Well, the Christians burned it down. All right, so a couple things for the audience. The factoids. It was one of the longest standing temple sites, I believe. And it was, as you mentioned, rebuilt multiple times because it got burned down multiple times. So, and every time they built it more and more grand. So by the time you get in the Roman era, it's like the biggest. By the time you get to when it's Paul in the book in the Bible, it is the biggest temple site in the entire ancient world, and a really,
Yes.
really fantastic, important pilgrimage site, very famous. And then the Christians totally burn it down and totally wreck it, and then they hauled off all the stones to build with other projects.
Exactly. And there were multiple temples, and one of the temples was burnt down because by Herostratus. And he was, so this is long before the Christians. And he burnt it down on the day that Alexander the Great was to be born, so that to become famous. Okay.
And
His name
they
was
say that Artemis was distracted by tending to Alexander's birth. And
exactly that's the
that's
story.
why it was able to, that guy was the arsonist was able to get in there.
Exactly. It's a great story. And his name was forbidden to be mentioned, similar to this fellow here.
Right.
Um, he must not be named. Okay. And well, Herostratus' name was
But now here we
mentioned.
are,
I'm
the
not the first.
blasphemers. We're naming them.
Yeah, well,
I
I
guess
didn't start it.
I guess
Blame.
we're not subject to their law anymore.
Yeah, all these other people. I didn't do it. Okay. Now, what's very interesting about Ephesus is that there are in addition to the Ephesian Artemis, there are other female characters though. Women in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, this is Roman time period, they weren't slaves. They had a significant part of society. And Sophia on the temple of the Library of Celsus, there's the library is long ago destroyed. We have, I believe these are reproduction of the statues. Sophia is wisdom. Arete is virtue. Episteme is knowledge. And Enoia is thought. My daughter, her good friend of her in high school, was named Sophia, and she was also valedictorian. So maybe there's something to that. But so this is the Greco-Romans were not, you know, women were included in society, perhaps maybe more so in the home than they were in the senates. Yeah.
Right.
And we can carry on these matriarchal symbols, and you could add 20 to these based on your work.
Well, right.
But
And then the Virgin Mary, the traditions are from Ephesus. And so it just carries right on into the Catholic Virgin Mary traditions without
exactly.
missing a beat.
And so our looking at the Temple of Artemis and where they dug up these Ephesian Artemises, if that's a temple, then why isn't the leopard pillar room at Göbekli Tepe a temple? And in the archaeologists post Klaus Schmidt are saying that they're all special rooms. They're not. It's not temples. It's the tourism people that are pushing the narrative. Well, I would say the tourism people are right that room is a temple, just the way the Temple of Artemis. You believe one, you're going to believe the other. And so we're going to enter Cybele into our narrative, going back into pre-Proto Neolithic, Göbekli Tepe, into the mythology, the arts and literature as the image that we see. I assume it was the family tradition, same as Çatalhöyük, and we can bring it now into the modern education, that Göbekli Tepe was matriarchy in the Neolithic. In the same way they introduced Dionysius as being, by changing the story, by saying it was Dionysius. And one of the things at Ephesus really surprised me is we were taken by the tour guide to this Blessed Virgin Mary statue, and next to her is a wishing tree, and you can see a wish on the tree, and most of it's for fertility, that predates the Virgin Mary. Okay, so the people in that region they're not separating the two. These animistic ideas of a tree, you can wish upon a tree versus praying upon the Virgin Mary. The tree existed before that Virgin Mary. Okay,
Right.
because you can look outside the tree, and it was before 1996. Okay. And so the people in the region they're integrating the two, whereas St. Paul was trying to separate the two. I mean,
Hmm.
clearly trying to separate the two. And so this is where I think St. Paul got it wrong. St. Paul was saying that the Ephesians that idolatry is wrong and it's against the one God and all that sort of stuff. What he should have said to them is, you wait a century or two, and you can sell idols of me. You can sell idols of the Virgin Mary. You can sell idols of all the saints are on the horizon. Because Roman Catholicism, we could say at the very least, and Greek Orthodox, they're full of idols, and
Right.
idolatry is massive business in the Mediterranean for those faiths. Um, so idolatry, St. Paul's message didn't fully carry across, and people are still assimilating the wishing tree not as a prayer tree, but they're wishing for good fortune, and they're projecting their inner
Yeah,
psyche.
yeah. I mean, the Virgin Mary was always used by the Catholics to assimilate the pagan goddess traditions. I mean, that was like a really powerful functional purpose that she served, and she absorbed like all of like the prayer formats and like the spiritual technology of like praying for
Yeah,
intercession. Just goes right into her.
they changed the name. They
Yeah.
changed the name, and that's my read. That's my read on Ephesus. I won't go the but people can find me for Ryan.com. And this is not what I do. I do prehistory. I go back to 40,000 years ago, and I look at the cave art and how people have inherited those traditions. Um, but I stumbled across this in
Me too.
a I completely stumbled across this concept uh, in a request for an Ephesus presentation of which I knew very little about. And on that path, I read Ed's book. Um, Brilliant book. I had my Kindle. And then when I was on AM Byte, sometime after that, um, we talked about Ed. We talked about
Right, right,
AM
right.
Byte and the work. But I'm going to tell you, I didn't make those connections with Göbekli Tepe, which you had made previously, until maybe we're into July now, into June. Oh no, May. I didn't know that. I didn't make the the birth and character connections until May. I didn't see it in your work, but it was on a last minute stumble that made the story itself. A
Yeah, I may
story
not
that
have mentioned in the book that they're birthing. I've
yeah
learned so much since I wrote that book. Um, but I definitely reference those characters. I definitely, I would learn that from somebody else for sure, probably
yeah
Merlin Stone. Um, that keyed me into these connections. That was certainly not my own original research.
sure.
Um,
Did she talk about the birthing characters of Göbekli Tepe? Do you
I'd
remember?
have to go double check.
I mentioned yeah, because I always want to, even if I stumbled upon it myself, I always want to credit the person who found it first. I
Right.
always want to do that.
Yeah, it's a lot of stumbling. I often find I have an idea and then I'll find other people have already been working on it. And then it's like, then I just run down their work. But yeah, I stumbled into all this goddess stuff too. Have you ever read the book Alphabet and the Goddess?
No.
You would love this one. This is another guy who stumbled into it. Um,
Okay.
Leonard Shallon. And anyone that's listening, there's like a 1 hour long lecture of his that pretty much sums up the whole book. That's on YouTube. That if you just search his name and the name of the book. This guy also stumbled. He was a brain surgeon who studied left brain, right brain stuff, and stumbled into how um, literacy is left brain and art is right brain. And
Sure.
somehow he stumbled into that the cultures that are more literate are more patriarchal, and that patriarchy follows literacy in history. He must have been some kind of history buff. But
Okay.
so he has this whole line that the cultures that are more literate become increasingly patriarchal, which I totally think is true. Um, and he stumbled into it from this left brain, right brain perspective as a brain surgeon. It's quite fascinating. I highly recommend you checking it out. Um,
That's interesting. So I do um, a narrative of Basque mythology. We should do it sometime in the future. And I start off with Mary, the Basque goddess character, who she is at the top of the pantheon. It's not
We're
Zeus.
talking
Um,
Spain, Basques in
this is
Spain.
the Basque people in northern Spain. And the Basque
Okay.
people, from my perspective, they either are descendants of the Upper Paleolithic cave artists, or they went to the caves, which they definitely did, and they borrowed those traditions. And Mary is at the top of the pantheon. The Zeus character, Ode, is subservient to her, is her consort, and she's very much an animistic goddess, I should say. But she's the one, and
Yeah.
those traditions carry on down the line into current day Basque practices.
Hmm.
Um, and so the I did that. I did that a few years ago. But someday we'll do. Maybe we can do it in your program. It takes it to pre-literate societies as the same concept, or less structured societies. Now,
Well,
did you read Neumann's book? Did you read Neumann's book?
who? Which book?
Neumann wrote the book about goddess and goddesses. He was probably in the early 1900s. He was
Right.
on
Right.
team Carl Jung, and his perspective was that this is part of the psyche, that the
Right.
goddess is part of the psyche. Um, but he a few artifacts he didn't have the correct interpretations of. But the problem with being part of the psyche, as the pinnacle of the psyche, is that we through this discussion we had today, we saw changes. We saw it from Göbekli to Çatalhöyük. The Hittites were patriarchal, and then we saw this inner conflict among the ancient Ephesians, and then we saw the undercurrents of the same characters, and that doesn't jive with the mother goddess being the forever eternal goddess. Whereas what you said, or I like what you said, is that the patriarchy came more prominent in literate societies. Um, so it's I like that. I like that perspective. That just because there were goddesses doesn't mean they're always goddesses. And in the same perspective as with the ancient Greeks, just because there was always a Zeus doesn't mean that there have always been a Zeus as the top of the food chain. But I like what you said. I like that.
Yeah, no, our religions clearly shift over time, and even within a religious tradition, even within Christianity, our perspectives on God have shifted a lot. You go back 500 years, 1,000 years, 1,500 years, we be having very different conversations about God and Jesus, even within Christianity, much less across cultures. Because as we learn more, I learned this from Karen Armstrong in comparative religion, was like she had a book, History of God, that influenced me a lot. I read it when I was pretty young, and and she described exactly that, to like how people never stop believing in God, but how they describe it and understand it,
Right.
that does change. And
Yeah.
same thing with goddesses, it changes. And for me, diving into the goddess stuff is maybe understand the Hindu perspective that the male and female, it's really the mind and matter are coexistent and eternal. And that the cosmos, just as you have a mind and body, so does the cosmos have mind and body. And so material and immaterial, and the material world is the mother. Mother is matter, magna
Sure.
mater. It's the same word. We get the word mother from the word matter, matter, material. She is the physical, she is the physics, the mass energy of physics. That's how the Hindus describe Shakti.
Mhm.
And while the males are mind, they're immaterial. And so and they both have agency and they're interacting with one another. And the cosmos is a dyad, not just a monad. And I think that's really
Hmm.
where we're trying to like me and some other folks having this conversation that like recognize the cosmos as a dyad. In the Western culture, we fundamentally look at it as a monad. It's a singular thing, whether it comes from monotheism, we think it's a monad, but also enlightenment thinking that flips the scripts and says all material world is also a monad. They're both a monad, whether it's idealism versus materialism. As philosophical debates over consciousness, um, and but both sides are a monad. Either consciousness arrives from matter, or matter arrives from consciousness. What I'm trying to say, what the Hindus say, is that mind and matter fundamentally coexist, and it's like a fabric, um, and that the universe is a singular universe, but it has parents, so to speak, and um, and so there is a mother to go with the father. There's a God as a mother. I like it. Totally convinced as a worldview,
Sure.
that Gaia consciousness, and that we swim in a sea of consciousness, and that um, Yeah, and that the material, because material world is she is circular. She is the cycle of creation and destruction, while he is the creator. He gives form. He gives form and ideas. She gives the matter, and then they come together to create reality.
Absolutely, I like that. You know, I grew up we're probably about the same age or so, and in middle school, I read, Western Civilization. That was the class that we took. We had a,
Sure, I had those
textbook like
classes.
this, and what we learned, or our worldview was what came from the Greco-Romans,
Right,
um,
and
and some
Judeo-Christian.
Judeo-Christian record exactly. What was passed down, what was approved by the school boards and the states and all that sort of stuff. And I like to hear about Hindus. I like to hear about the Basque, which I've studied, and I like to hear about pre-Ephesian Turkey. Okay,
Right.
because there's a story behind before Western civilization, which we were fed in our age and our generation, that is became part of our shaping of reality. As I
Sure.
made that diagram, but it's great
Yeah,
to
no,
hear
we are
about.
shaped by our narratives, and we're shaped by our knowledge base. And to be
Yeah,
fair, we've learned so much more in the last like 100 years, and last couple of decades. I mean, some of the most
sure,
fantastic information is really brand new. Like that study you had about the DNA of
sure.
the Çatalhöyük,
January. Yeah.
fantastic data. That's a fantastic
Yeah.
data point that I'll be able to use. Um,
Science. It's
and it's
science.
and it's and it's brand new information. And so
Yeah.
I think we just need to be open minded and recognize that like we're learning a lot and we need to
Yeah.
process a lot of new information because I believe we're at this real inflection point in history that is, you know, our old ideals, our old religions are all, they all need to be shifted because none of the old religions I think can transit seamlessly into the space age. Like everyone's due for a reformation right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was fun. This is an amazing session. To the great mind and the lesser
Yeah,
mind, the
no, Bernie, it's great to
disciple,
connect
the
with you, and
Padawan.
we should probably wrap it up now or at that sort of
Yeah,
after that hour mark. But I do
yeah,
want to keep on talking to you offline and continue this conversation, collaborate however we can because this is great
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely.
And I'll be posting this to the to the platforms. So I think we're gonna wrap it up. Ed Dodge here, lostgoddess.io. You can check out the Substack. Please subscribe. Bernie, if you want to say anything on your way out the door here.
Just beforerunning.com is the portal to all the stuff that I do. And I very much appreciate having been on this program to listen and learn.
All right, thank you, Bernie. It's been really informative, and hopefully, I know the audience will enjoy it. So thank you so much. I'm gonna hit stop now if my mouse wants to work. All right, thanks, Bernie.